We're going to talk about getting to your destiny. Have you become a manipulator? Every one of you, just as Pastor Brandy spoke, have a destiny on their lives. Each and every one of you. So many times, people have this concept that, oh, well, if I'm not called to a pulpit ministry, well, then I don't have a destiny. That is a lie from the pits of hell. You have a destiny. We quote this all the time in the Word, but I want to say it again, and I want you to think about it. Jeremiah 29:11 through 13. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me, and when you see me with all your heart. He has awesome plans. He has plans bigger than what you can see. A daily life and commitment to Him. Ministry is marketplace. Ministry can be in the business field because people need to see God on you. They need to see this is prosperity, this is favor, this is when you listen to the plans of God. And sometimes those around you will say, that makes no sense. Why are you doing that? I don't know. God told me to. And it will work, and they need to see that. They need to see that in your life. And so ministry is not this concept. What happens is, whether sometimes a prophet will tell you something and that will gear you in the right direction. Sometimes God will give you, on the inside of you, you just know that you know this is what you're called to do. And sometimes it's through the Word. God calls you, and so you're like, okay, God, I'm going. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And then, I don't know, maybe a few months, a year goes by, and you go, God, we're going to do this. Come on now. This is what God called me to do. We're going to do it. No, it's not. What's wrong? God, are you still there? I'm waiting. And then you start regressing into the 3-year-old mentality. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Hey, God. I'm over here. Me, over here. Did you forget about me? Hey, God! I want this now. I didn't want this, but you told me to do this. So why is it happening? Then you begin to get very frustrated because it's like, well, God, if you're not going to come through for me, then I'm just going to grab it instead. And it's not always a conscious choice. Sometimes you don't even think about it, but it's like, well, this would just be easier, so I'm going to do it myself. So you start trying to do this, and you start trying to do this. All the while, you're getting more frustrated at God because you can't do it yourself. And what will happen is when you try to do it yourself, you'll just create an Ishmael. And for years, I said to the Lord, why have you called me to do this? This is just really cool. Why would you call me to do this? Who am I? And finally, the Lord said to me one day, He said, it is not because I called you, it's because I created you in the womb for this. You are a king's kid. He's got destiny and purpose on the inside of you that He created you in the mother's womb. You are awesome. That's who you are. And so we have this false pride mentality that, oh, I can't do that, and I can't do that. Yes, you can. If God called you to do it, yes, you can. We're not just talking about getting to your destiny here. We're talking about legacy. Do you know your attitude will determine your legacy? So to manipulate means that you want to control something or falsify. You are trying to control the situation instead of allowing God to control it. Eve is the first one. 2:17. It says, and now God is talking to Adam. It says, but of the tree of, he's explaining all these trees. But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you should not eat of it, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. Ate of it anyway. But wait a minute. God did not create Eve until Genesis 2:21 through 24. So God spoke it to Adam. He did not speak it to Eve. I don't get it. Why would you hold her accountable for something you never told her not to do? And the Lord's response was very clear to me. He said, because she didn't understand authority. She didn't understand when I told her husband it was just as good as telling her. You will become a manipulator if you do not understand authority and the authority that God puts in your life. You will not get to the fulfillment of your destiny if you are constantly bucking the spiritual authorities in your life. Thieves are, and it might have been a little bit easier for the serpent to deceive her because she didn't have a clear understanding that God had really spoken that to her. Hey, baby. let's do this. And of course, Adam is deceived. What was Eve's legacy? Now, yes, she is the mother of all mankind. Rock on, mighty woman. But every time you talk about Eve, what do you think of? That she was a manipulator and that she deceived her husband and that she is the reason why we women have issues every month and we had to go through labor pains. And don't get me wrong, somebody would have done it. I understand that. But that is her legacy. Hebrews 13:17 in the Amplified says, obey your spiritual leaders and submit to them continually, recognizing their authority over you. For they are constantly keeping watch over your souls regarding spiritual welfare, as men who will have to render an account of their trust. Do your part to let them do with gladness and not with sighing or groaning, for what would not be profitable to you either. So you have to obey the spiritual leaders in their lives. Be your husband. Sometimes that could be your boss. Sometimes that could be your pastor. But you have to obey those spiritual leaders. And you know what? If they're off, you don't need to always tell them. You could just pray for them. Say, you know what, God, if the problem is in me, and most of you, if you've heard me counsel at any time, I've probably said this. I always say that in my life. God, if the problem is in me, then change me. If it's in them, go get them. Rachel was another one that tried to manipulate God in her life. Pride in the Bible is constantly referred to as yeast. About a little bit of yeast will leaven the whole lump. Well, what does yeast do? It puffs up. A lot of times when God calls you into doing things, what will happen? If I was going to go bake bread, I'm going to put bread in all the ingredients, put the yeast, put a cover on it, and set it in the back corner. So a lot of times what happens is when God's called you to do something, he might set you on a back corner for a period of time to see what happens. Rachel was desperate to have a child. And it talks about, now when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said to Jacob, give me a child lest I die. Throwing a 3-year-old temper tantrum, isn't she? And she's doing exactly what I said before. I want it now. God. And what does God respond? Let's find out. Because Jacob is the representative of God in her life. He's her husband. And Jacob's anger was aroused against Rachel, and he said, am I in the place of God who has withheld you from the womb, fruit from your womb? And so she is just so desperate, and so then she gives him her maid, and that's how they begin having children. It can't be God. We'll just make this happen. Leah just starts having all these children. She is just a bunny rabbit, man. She's having all these kids, and she's having all these kids, and she's having all these kids, and Rachel's going, God! Verse number 14, one of Leah's children, his name is Reuben, it says, now Reuben went to the days of wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But Leah says to her, is it a small matter that you've taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also? And Rachel says, therefore he will lie with you tonight for your son's mandrakes. Know what a mandrake is? It's witchcraft. It is root. It is this. No, it is this root, and a lot of cultures consider it's supposed to be to help the goddess of fertility or something like that. And it actually looks like a woman's body. If I've seen pictures of it online. So she's so desperate to fulfill the plan of God for her life, she's willing to prostitute out her husband for witchcraft. Now, how does this pertain to our lives? When God has called us to do something, sometimes we get so frustrated that we're really willing to prostitute out the favor on our lives. Do you think a mandrake is going to help her get pregnant, or do you think the fact that she's sleeping with her husband is going to help her get pregnant? It becomes this counteractive thing. It's not working. I did a word study on that, remembered. If you look in the concordance, the remembered means that he made her ready. She had to allow herself to be made ready. It goes on with them for these 3 or 4 years. It's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. Oh, I wish it would sometimes. Faith is consistent. It's I don't care what's going on. It's a circumstance, and my boat is stable. And that is a mature Christian attitude, so that you're not going, ah! Rachel, what was her legacy? She dies in childbirth. Rachel. She gave birth to Joseph and Benjamin and dies in childbirth. What's that symbolic of? Well, Destiny is always talking about giving birth to a child. It's a vision. You're giving birth to something. She never saw her vision fulfilled. If you want to really have that legacy and see it fulfilled, then don't get me wrong, she fulfilled the call. She had things happen. She had Joseph. Joseph redeemed the line, helped them not starve out in the wilderness. But she didn't live to see it happen. So Sarah, we're going on to Sarah. Genesis 16 through 23, and Sarah, most of you have heard this story, how Sarah, God said that she was going to have a child, and she's old by this time. What? I just can't imagine that. So God says that she's going to have this child, and she didn't have the faith to wrap that around that. And I can imagine. Okay, God, so be it. Her husband's such a mighty man of God. I love Abraham. And okay, we're going through this, and it's just not happening again. What did I say? Okay, God, yay, we're having a kid. It's not happening. The years are going by. Her biological clock is past ticked. I mean, it's talked. Let's put it that way. It's just like, dude, it ain't happening. And it just keeps going on and on and on and on. And as the years go by, she starts thinking in her head, well, how can I make this happen? I want to fulfill God's call on my life. How can I make this happen? So what does she do again? She prostitutes out her maid to her husband. And so her maid gets pregnant. It was Sarah's manipulation that started it. She was the catalyst. The maid gets pregnant, and she has Ishmael. Now, Ishmael, they thought actually that Ishmael must be the promised child. They thought that they fulfilled what God had said for them to fulfill. And eventually the time comes around where the angel shows up, and no, you are going to have a child with Sarah. Eventually there were friction. Obviously there'd be friction. Your husband has this kid, and then you get pregnant finally, and, there's friction. And so Abraham has to make the decision to tell Ishmael he has to go. Do you guys know who Ishmael is? He's the founder of Islam. So we're still fighting this battle over Isaac versus Ishmael. We're still fighting who's the promised child. What's Sarah's legacy? Seriously, she helped start Islam? In Isaiah 55, 8 through 11 in the Message, it says, I don't think the way you think. The way you work isn't the way I work. God's decree. For as the sky soars high above the earth, so the way I work surpasses the way you work. And the way I think is beyond the way you think. Just as rain and snow descends from the skies and don't go back until they've watered the earth, doing their work of making things grow and blossom, producing seed for the farmers and food for the hungry, so will the words that come out of my mouth not come back empty-handed. They'll do the work I sent them to do. They'll complete the assignment I gave them. It's up to you to be obedient. It's not up to you to accomplish it. God's going to do that. It's regardless. It's going to happen. Life is such a vapor. What's your legacy? Is it a legacy that you're known for starting other religions and you're known for... What is your legacy? Did you never live to see this happen? You want to live. You want to live with purpose. So take this time, if you want to come to the altar, but take this time to recommit your life to the Lord, that you won't be a manipulator.